Thank you, Gautam. Thanks for coming back. I spent the second half of 2017 in Yemen, where I was the head of logistics for the World Health Organization. What a 6 months. My humanitarian career so far, as Gautam mentioned in lots of detail, has taken me to 4 continents. I worked for Médecins Sans Frontières, I've worked for Canadian Red Cross. Never before have I had more impact, and never before have I been so well paid as when I worked for the World Health Organization in Yemen. Despite both those 2 factors, I still left after 6 months, because it was also the most stressful and the most difficult job I'd ever done. And after 6 months, I needed a rest. We had a war, a famine, and the world's biggest cholera outbreak all happening at the same time. We had 2 governments fighting each other. And the thing about that is that whenever you want to help somebody here, the guys over here consider them to be your enemy and they try to block. And the same goes the other way. The photos that you see here of this beautiful sunset in Sana'a, I took, and that's air raid shelter number 4. So we had an air raid shelter at work. There's another photo in here somewhere. Yes, this is me taking part in the Not a Target campaign, an international campaign of humanitarians asking for people not to kill us at work. This cholera outbreak that I mentioned, the thing about cholera is that a patient might need 6 liters of intravenous IV fluid to recover from cholera. At this point, we had 1 million suspected cases. That's a lot of stuff to import, a lot of planes to charter, a lot of vessels, and a lot of trucks, a lot of warehouses. Everything that you need to bring into Yemen needs a certificate of authenticity, a certificate of origin, a waybill, and permission from both governments to move it for them to essentially have a mini ceasefire and a guarantee not to attack the vessel or the plane or the truck that's moving things about. That makes my job very difficult as head of logistics in that situation. Simultaneous to this, there's also a cholera outbreak in Ethiopia. And so there's a global shortage of the IV fluids that our patients need to save their lives. When Angela, thank you Angela, invited me to speak today, she said, please start off by saying, how would I like things to be? What should the world be like? What should the humanitarian systems be like? Here's the thing. Humanitarian systems shouldn't exist. We shouldn't need to do this. I don't enjoy this work. I'd rather be unemployed. I'd rather be a carpenter. But we do it because there's gaps. Gaps that the local government should fill. But they don't. And these gaps grow. Year on year, there's a consistent 40% gap between identified humanitarian needs and the response that goes with them. Last year, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs calculated that we needed to spend 25 billion US dollars to address the unmet humanitarian needs. We didn't. We only spent 60% of that. We only spent 15 billion on it, which sounds like a lot, but as James mentioned, collectively we spend more in chewing gum. The global expenditure of the ice cream industry is 61 billion, 4 times that of what we spent on humanitarian response. Collectively, it may seem like we don't care. We spent 1.7 trillion on militaries last year. For every dollar that was spent on humanitarian action, we spent 113 on militaries. And of the money that we spent on humanitarian action, 0.2% went towards innovation. Meanwhile, in the private sector, Tesla, Apple, Dell, pharmaceutical companies are spending double digits of revenue on innovation. They understand the need to do research and development. They understand the need to do innovation. They also understand that the best return comes from taking bold risks. As we speak, warehouses run by Amazon have robots putting things in boxes and delivering them to houses using drones. Netflix is busy dismantling the movie and cinema industry with their streaming. I got here by Airbnb, sorry, I didn't. I got here by Uber, but I stayed in an Airbnb last night. Meanwhile, in the humanitarian space, we're debating if innovation is a buzzword or not. So while the successful corporations are busy investing double digits of revenue in innovation, the humanitarian sector hasn't managed to get it to 1%. And why is that? It's because donors don't like to take risks with the public money. There's an aversion to risk amongst those who fund humanitarian response. Here's the thing, though. The world is changing. The climate is changing. Water levels are changing. If anybody needs any evidence, take a look over here. More than ever, people are moving, and people are fleeing violence and persecution and inequality. They're also fleeing rising sea levels. Generally, people are moving from rural situations to urban situations. And they're living more and more in urban slums. Forests are being taken down to make way for people or for logging rights. And all these factors are having an effect on patterns of disease. And if you want a good example of that, look at the Ebola outbreak that's happening in DR Congo right now. Wars are going on for longer, and in some of these wars, international humanitarian law, also known as Geneva Conventions, are not always respected. Civilians are being harmed, as are colleagues. Now, there are some innovations in the humanitarian space. Plum peanut is commonly used. It was a peanut-based therapeutic food. That was a good innovation. You see here inflatable hospitals used by Canadian Red Cross and MSF. These were particularly useful after the earthquake in Haiti when you needed to build the building quickly and when people were terrified of living in, being treated in existing buildings. Telemedicine is commonly used in MSF, where I often work. MSF is adapting solar-powered air conditioning. MSF is using ultrasound in the field, something that didn't happen before. But we're still way behind the speed and the adoption of innovation as the private sector. So the world is changing. And I say that humanitarians need to also change to adapt to this changing world. There are growing humanitarian needs, and there's a growing gap that I mentioned earlier around how it's funded. So we don't have enough resources to address the needs that we have. I say it's a requirement that we're optimally efficient and we're optimally responsive to deliver the best care with the limited resources that we have. And I leave you with the thought that either you think that the humanitarian system is currently perfect and doing everything perfectly, or you accept that we need to change in some ways, and therefore that we need innovation. Thank you for listening to my talk.